Good morning, students. Yesterday we saw and discussed that Buddhism was spreading very, very rapidly in different parts of India and, of course, East Asia. And there was a great novelty to Buddhism in the sense that, at least for Indians, that it was not about Varna or Jati and those kind of things where the accident of birth was much more important. And if you were by birth, if you were a Brahmin, then you would perpetually remain an upper caste person, and if you were born as a Shudra or a Vaishya, then you've had it. So guys, though of course Rig Veda, when actually had devised this kind of this Varna system, Rig Veda had been very particular and made it very clear that yes, Varna would be determined by your profession and not by birth. So Rig Veda had kept it very, very simple and flexible, whereby a Brahmin today, tomorrow could be, if he indulges in business, could be a Vaishya, and if he indulges in, probably becomes a fighter, then he becomes a Kshatriya, and if a Kshatriya chooses to be a great man of learning, he could become a Brahmin, or a Vaishya who chose to be a great man of learning, he could become a Brahmin. So things were very, very flexible, very, very flexible, guys. But it was as the centuries kept on kind of passing, and things started getting more and more and more rigid, because students, you have to understand, normally, even today, guys, if you go to Gujarat, or if you go to Maharashtra, say for example, do you think a Gujarati businessman in his house talks about astronomy and astrophysics and nuclear science? Certainly not. If you go to a Gujarati household, the only thing that he would be talking about 90% of the time would be the Sensex score index or the National Stock Exchange, or कौन से धंधे में पैसा लगाना hai, right? And if you go to Bihar, then 90% of the time a Bihari would be talking about politics, and similarly with Uttar Pradesh, guys. So this is what happens, generation after generation. It becomes very, very natural, it's very human, students, right? That a Brahmin's because son, because of the reason that the kind of environment is such an environment prevails within the household, he ends up following what his father was doing, so he ends up becoming a Brahmin himself. That is, at that point in time, when you could become a Brahmin, and where your Varna system was determined only on the basis of what your profession was. So it was obvious that if you happen to be a fighter, if you happen to be a Kshatriya, and if you've been in the king's army, or if you are a soldier, then naturally in your house you do not have Vedas, and there is no discussion probably on Vedas and Dharma Sutras and Upanishads and Purans. Definitely not, because the environment of the house is about valor, bravery, honor, what makes a great fighter, sacrifice, loyalty. Guys, those are the things, those are the prevailing sentiments within the house. You have bows and arrows, and you have swords, and you have shields, and you have spears. Guys, you do not have Vedas in your house. So naturally, the environment of the house is such that the son also ends up getting into getting into probably some kind of an army, or he gets into basically the profession where it is the fighting is paramount. So it was a similar with Vaishya. So you do not expect a businessman, any other kind of an environment, to prevail in his house. So guys, naturally, as these things started, when people started inheriting all that knowledge, whether it was a Brahmanical knowledge, whether it was a fighting knowledge, it was a business knowledge, or it was a Shudras, who were the poor people who were indulging in basically the menial jobs. So, guys, that thing continued. It was not that Hinduism only as a faith was becoming extremely rigid. No. There were a lot of other reasons. Of course, it was getting rigid, but there were other reasons at play as well. So it was not always the kind of Brahminical conspiracy which people would very frequently talk about all the time. So, so today we would also be looking at. Let's start. We have seen that Buddhist ideas and practices emerged out of a process of dialogue with other traditions, including those of the Brahmins, Jains, and others. Not all of those ideas and practices were preserved in texts. Some of these interactions can be seen in the ways in which sacred places have come to be identified. From earliest times, people tend to regard certain places as sacred. These included sites with special trees or unique rocks, or sites of awe-inspiring natural beauty. These sites with small shrines attached to them were sometimes described as chaityas. Uh, and what's mentioned right next to the paragraph is chaitya may also have been derived from the word chitta, meaning a funeral pyre, and by extension a funeral mound. Students, you have to understand again, as students of history, that these are the things, guys, which are very common to all the cultures across the world, right? That certain places are regarded extremely pious and holy and very sacred, and very auspicious. And in a similar fashion, guys, even today, in spite of so-called scientific evolution and development, we would still consider certain places to be lucky, certain places to be unlucky, and that's what we human beings are, and that's what makes us human. So even if you go about the Greek civilization, I'm talking about the ancient civilizations, the Greek civilizations, the Roman civilizations, the Chinese, or for that matter, the early civilizations of Americas. Guys, you have to understand that. Just to give you a trivia and to share a trivia with you, Alexander the Great, before he embarked on his global conquest, he went, because even someone like him who had so much of self-belief, he also went to the oracle at Delphi, because he wanted to know whether he would emerge successful in his venture or not. And Delphi was a very famous place, where people used to go there, because it was considered to be a very holy and a very pious place, and very important one if you wanted to know your future. So, guys, if these things are the things which make us human. It has nothing to do with a very this is not at all India centric. So that's what I'm trying to say. So Buddhist literature mentions several chaityas. It also describes places, but yes, when we are particularly studying, if you want to, because we are studying about chaityas, so definitely it derived from the word chitta, which means funeral pyre, and by extension a funerary mound. Buddhist literature mentions chaityas. It also describes places associated. Guys, please remember these maps, the major Buddhist sites. Every map which comes here, they are especially in part one, this book. All the maps are extremely important. You would always get questions. Buddha's life, where he was born, Lumbini, where he attained enlightenment, Bodh Gaya, where he gave his first sermon, Sarnath, and where he attained Nibbana, that Kushinagar. Gradually, each of these places came to be regarded as sacred. We know that about 200 years after the time of Buddha, Ashoka erected a pillar at Lumbini to mark the fact that he had visited the place. Why were these stupas built? Uh, there were other places too that were regarded as sacred. This was because relics of the Buddha, such as his body remains or objects used by him, were buried there. These were mounds known as stupas. The tradition of erecting stupas may have been pre-Buddhist, but they came to be associated with Buddhism. So this is very interesting. So it is not that Buddhists were the first ones to come up with the idea of stupas, okay, whereby you had certain important objects, certain holy objects, uh, which were put at not exactly a temple, but because before Buddhism, they are known as stupa, and their architecture is also a very typical one, and the designs are very typical ones. But in the earlier times as well, certain important, because students, you have to understand one very important thing, that India has always been a great center of learning, a place of great saints, a place of great Maharishis, And when they were gone, then definitely the objects used by them, it could have been their bed or their dhoti or their kurta or their anything that they used, because or their sandals, that is just koham, made of wood, that just which was known as khadam. Guys, all these things were considered to be extremely important symbolically, and people thronged to those places. And you must have also seen a lot of places in India. You must have, whereby some great saint, he might have been gone 300 years, 500 years before, but where he lived, or where she lived, and their bed just go up, and which they used, which in Hindi heartlanders used, is known as chonki, or for that matter their kadam, that is sandal, which I just said. Those kinds of things have still been preserved, and hundreds of people from the neighboring areas go there on important occasions, pray and offer their flowers and prasad. And when a kid is born, or for the marriage, they have to take the blessing. They always go to those local deities, who literally are almost like deities, though who were born just like humans, like you and I, and probably have been gone 200, 300 years. And guys, if you go to Calcutta, for example, in Dakshineshwar, one of the greatest saints who ever lived in India, Ramakrishna Paramans and his and Shardama, if you go, there is a bedroom, which has been really preserved really well, and hundreds of people and thousands of people from around the world make it, at least, it's always there, that at least they should enter that room and pray to the memory of Ramakrishna, though he's gone many years before. So guys, this is something which has always been a part of Indian tradition. And because Buddha was also born in India, so his followers continued with that tradition. Simple, nothing special about it. Okay, it has always been a part of Indian culture. So the tradition of erecting, that's why it says the tradition of erecting stupas may have been pre-Buddhist, and but they came to be associated with Buddhism since they contained relics regarded as sacred. The entire stupa came to be venerated, that is, held in high esteem. That's what it means, as an emblem of both the Buddha and the Buddhism, according to Buddhist text known as Ashoka Vadana. Ashoka distributed portions of Buddha's relics to every important town and ordered the construction of stupas over them. By the 2nd century BC, a number of stupas, including those at Bharhut, Sanchi, and Sarnath, had been built. Guys, even in Sri Lanka, in fact, it is believed that Ashoka, there is a monastery in Sri Lanka which houses, it is believed that the tooth of Gautam Buddha, the real original tooth, Gautam Buddha के दांत वहाँ रखे हैं. And they pray it, probably they pray it of course all the time, but they display it probably once a year. And it is believed that half of Sri Lanka is there to watch that great sight. So the relics, the portions, they have been considered to be, they have been preserved. Just imagine, but that was about 2600 years ago, and even today his tooth relics have been preserved. So guys, this is what the culture and tradition of India is. So we shall continue with the stupa tomorrow. Thank you.